Have you ever experienced the bewildering pain of loving someone who treats your affection like a crime they must punish you for, where every attempt to get closer results in them pulling further away, as if your love itself was something toxic they needed to protect themselves from? When love feels like punishment through avoidant emotional withdrawal, you enter one of the most psychologically confusing and emotionally devastating relationship dynamics possible, where the very thing that should bring two people together becomes the weapon used to keep you at a distance. This isn't about someone who struggles with intimacy in healthy ways or needs time to process emotions. This is about partners who use emotional withdrawal as a systematic punishment for your natural desire to connect, love, and be loved in return. Understanding how avoidants weaponize emotional withdrawal will help you recognize when you're being trained to suppress your most basic human needs in service of someone else's comfort with control and distance. The insights you'll discover today will explain why your attempts at affection are met with coldness, why expressing your feelings results in being made to feel like you've done something wrong, and why you find yourself constantly apologizing for wanting the basic emotional connection that healthy relationships require. This knowledge isn't just about understanding attachment styles, it's about recognizing when someone is using their emotional limitations as tools to punish you for having a heart that wants to love freely. The patterns revealed here will show you how emotional withdrawal becomes a form of psychological conditioning that trains you to associate love-giving with rejection and pain, creating relationships where you learn to love less rather than inspiring your partner to love more. Most importantly, you'll learn to distinguish between someone who genuinely struggles with emotional expression and someone who deliberately punishes emotional expression to maintain power and distance in relationships. When someone consistently makes you feel bad for loving them, you're not dealing with attachment issues, you're dealing with emotional abuse disguised as personal limitations. If you want to better understand someone's attachment style, see the link in the description to one of the most popular books on attachment theory. Picture a quiet Sunday morning in a cozy apartment in Brooklyn where Marnie Michaels from the HBO series Girls sat across from someone she had been dating for 6 months, feeling like she was walking through an emotional minefield. She had just made the mistake of saying, "I love you," for the first time. Words that had slipped out naturally during a moment of genuine happiness and connection. His response wasn't anger or surprise. It was something much more devastating. He simply went completely still, his face became expressionless, and he said quietly, "That's a lot of pressure to put on someone." The shift in energy was so immediate and complete that Marnie felt like she had accidentally detonated a bomb in the middle of their peaceful morning. What followed was 3 days of emotional winter. He didn't break up with her or even discuss what had happened. Instead, he became a polite stranger living in her space. His responses to her attempts at conversation became monosyllabic. His physical affection disappeared entirely. When she tried to address the change or ask if he was upset about what she had said, he would respond with confusion, claiming that nothing had changed and she was being dramatic. The message was clear without being spoken. Expressing love was a mistake that would be punished through the withdrawal of all warmth and connection. This wasn't the first time Marnie had experienced this pattern with him. Every time she had tried to deepen their emotional connection or express how much he meant to her, she was met with the same response. Immediate emotional withdrawal that felt like being put in relationship prison. When she had suggested they spend more time together, he became suddenly busy with work and friends. When she had shared something vulnerable about her past, he became distant and claimed she was getting too heavy. When she had tried to plan future activities together, he accused her of being clingy and trying to control his schedule. The punishment system was remarkably effective because it never looked like punishment. He never yelled, never called her names, never made obvious threats. Instead, he simply removed all warmth, affection, and emotional availability, whenever she displayed the natural behaviors of someone in a loving relationship. Over time, Mani began to unconsciously monitor her own behavior, suppressing her natural impulses to share her feelings, make plans, or express affection, because she had learned that these actions resulted in painful emotional abandonment. The most insidious part was how he framed her emotional needs as character flaws that were damaging to their relationship. "You're being too intense," he would say when she tried to discuss their future. "This kind of pressure makes me want to shut down," he would claim when she expressed frustration about his emotional unavailability. Her natural human desires for connection, affection, and emotional intimacy were reframed as attacks on his well-being that justified his withdrawal as self-protection. The turning point came when Mani realized she had stopped being herself entirely in the relationship. She had learned to speak in carefully neutral tones to avoid seeming too emotional. She had stopped sharing good news enthusiastically because excitement was labeled as too much. She had begun apologizing for having feelings, for wanting to spend time together, for caring about their relationship's direction. She was living like an emotional prisoner, constantly monitoring her behavior to avoid triggering his punishment through withdrawal. The breakthrough moment arrived during what should have been a romantic dinner when Mani decided to test her growing suspicions about their dynamic. She deliberately expressed genuine enthusiasm about a work opportunity she was excited about, watching carefully for his response. Like clockwork, his energy shifted from engaged to distant, and by the end of the evening, he was treating her like a stranger. But this time, instead of scrambling to figure out what she had done wrong, Mani saw the pattern clearly. Any display of emotional authenticity or enthusiasm was systematically punished through emotional abandonment. The revelation deepened when Mani started paying attention to what behaviors earned his warmth versus what behaviors triggered his withdrawal. She discovered that he was most available and affectionate when she was emotionally distant, independent, and asking nothing of him. The moment she displayed any need for connection, reassurance, or emotional intimacy, he would begin the process of emotional withdrawal that felt like watching someone she loved disappear before her eyes. The most shocking realization was that this wasn't about his inability to handle emotions. It was about his need to control the emotional temperature of their relationship. He was comfortable with connection only when it was entirely on his terms, and he used emotional withdrawal as a tool to train her to never ask for more than he was willing to give. Her emotional needs weren't problems to be worked through together. They were threats to his comfort zone that needed to be eliminated through systematic conditioning. The final piece of understanding came when Mani recognized that she had developed what psychologists call learned helplessness around her own emotional needs. She had stopped believing she had the right to want love, affection, or emotional connection because every attempt to seek these basic human needs had been met with punishment through withdrawal. She had learned to see her own heart's desires as problems to be managed rather than needs to be met. The climax came when Mani realized that his withdrawal wasn't protecting him from her intensity. It was protecting him from having to be a real partner in a real relationship. By training her to suppress her emotional needs through the threat of abandonment, he had created a dynamic where he could enjoy the benefits of her love and devotion without having to offer genuine intimacy or vulnerability in return. She was doing all the emotional work while he remained safely distant, receiving everything and giving little. Understanding when love feels like punishment requires recognizing the specific ways that avoidant partners use emotional withdrawal to condition your behavior and suppress your natural relationship needs. First, pay attention to whether your expressions of love, affection, or emotional needs are consistently met with coldness, distance, or withdrawal. Healthy partners might struggle with emotional expression, but they don't punish you for having emotions or wanting connection. If you notice that sharing your feelings results in your partner becoming distant or critical, you're dealing with someone who uses withdrawal as a control mechanism rather than someone who simply struggles with intimacy. Second, examine whether you've begun changing your behavior to avoid triggering their withdrawal. If you find yourself walking on eggshells, suppressing your natural enthusiasm, or apologizing for having emotional needs, you're being trained through punishment to become less of yourself rather than inspiring your partner to become more emotionally available. Healthy relationships encourage you to be more authentic over time, not less authentic to avoid punishment. Third, notice the difference between someone who withdraws due to overwhelm versus someone who withdraws to punish emotional expression. Genuine overwhelm involves communication about needing space and reassurance about the relationship's stability. Punitive withdrawal involves silent treatment, emotional coldness, and making you feel like your emotions are the problem rather than working together to find solutions. Fourth, observe whether their availability and warmth are contingent on your emotional distance. If your partner is most loving when you're least needy and most distant when you're most vulnerable, they're using conditional love as a control mechanism. They're training you to associate emotional connection with rejection, which creates relationships where you learn to love less rather than helping them learn to love more. Most importantly, trust your instincts about whether you're being punished for having normal human emotions and relationship needs. If expressing love feels dangerous, if wanting connection feels like asking for too much, if being yourself results in emotional abandonment, you're not in a relationship with someone who struggles with intimacy. You're in a relationship with someone who uses your love for them as a weapon against you. Remember that healthy relationships should make you feel safe to be vulnerable, excited to share your feelings, and confident that your emotional needs matter to your partner. When love feels like punishment, you're not being too much. You're being human in a relationship with someone who has learned to weaponize emotional distance to avoid the real work of love. When love feels like punishment through avoidant emotional withdrawal, you enter a psychological prison where your most natural human impulses become sources of pain and rejection. This dynamic doesn't happen because you're too emotional or because your partner simply struggles with intimacy. It happens because someone has learned to use your love for them as a tool to control your behavior and suppress your needs. The tragedy of these relationships is that they turn your greatest strengths, your capacity for love, your emotional openness, your desire for connection, into vulnerabilities that can be exploited to keep you small, quiet, and emotionally distant. You begin to believe that love itself is dangerous, that wanting connection is selfish, and that your emotional needs are burdens rather than basic human requirements for healthy relationships. Understanding this dynamic is crucial because it helps you recognize that the problem isn't your intensity or your needs. The problem is being with someone who has learned to punish emotional expression as a way of maintaining control without having to offer genuine intimacy in return. Your job isn't to become less emotional to accommodate someone who can't handle your humanity. Your job is to find relationships where your emotions are welcomed, your needs are respected, and your love is cherished rather than punished. Breaking free from this cycle requires tremendous courage because it means choosing the uncertainty of being alone over the certainty of being emotionally punished for loving someone. It means refusing to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone and choosing partners who celebrate your emotional depth rather than punishing it. You deserve relationships that make you feel safe to love freely, to express your feelings openly, and to ask for what you need without fear of emotional abandonment. You deserve partners who see your emotional needs as opportunities for deeper connection rather than threats to their independence. You deserve love that feels like coming home to yourself, rather than love that requires you to abandon yourself to earn acceptance. The path forward involves learning to recognize punitive withdrawal, setting boundaries around how you will and won't be treated, and choosing relationships with people who want to meet your emotional needs rather than train you not to have them. Most importantly, it means remembering that real love doesn't feel like punishment, and anyone who makes you feel bad for loving them isn't worthy of your beautiful open heart. That withdrawal is only the beginning. Next, I'll expose the silent war, how avoidants break you down without words.